Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be doing another first impressions review. Today we're going to be looking at Otherworldly Izakaya Nobu, which is a kind of interesting manga. I read it digitally. Here's what the cover looks like. And I read it on Bookwalker. I had bought it a while back, and I just decided to read it this month. I can't remember if I put it on my TBR or if I just did it randomly, but I think I did put it on my TBR. And the author here is Natsuya Samikawa, and the illustrator is Virginia Nitohei, which is pretty cool. The publisher is Udon, and Udon really does some really good manga. Like, honestly, the only problem is that they're very much like Square Enix in the sense that you never know when they release stuff, and the stuff that they do release is like slightly more expensive than like what you would think is normal. And it doesn't necessarily appeal to the broadest audience, but it is quite good, so I definitely recommend it. The demographic here is seinen. I was about to say shonen, but no, it's seinen. And the genres here are food, isekai, and / portal fantasy. I wouldn't really call it isekai because it doesn't have like a lot of the associated isekai tropes. This isn't a story about someone that dies and then gets reborn in a fantasy world and then builds a restaurant. It's not like that. This is more of like, there's fantasy worlds, and somehow this restaurant attaches to this fantasy world and then lets patrons in from that fantasy world into the restaurant. So it's slightly different, but it is still kind of a portal fantasy type story. And isekai is more or less like the default portal fantasy in terms of like anime and manga. So you could call it isekai in that sense. Adaptations wise, this does have an anime. I didn't know this. But I Googled it, and it seems to have an anime. So I'm guessing it's relatively popular if it's something that was published in English. So that's cool. And the premise here is basically that there's this izakaya, which is, as far as I understand it, a special type of restaurant in Japan. It's kind of like a wine and dine type of restaurant. Like, it's kind of like a small time shop. And you go, and beer is relatively cheap, and they give you a bunch of food that you can eat with your beer. It's basically a bar, I guess, but not exactly. I don't know. I don't really know the distinction, but the place kind of looks more like a restaurant than a bar. So there you go. And it just appears in this fantasy world, and then we get to see a bunch of people from this fantasy world go to the restaurant and kind of experience things that are completely different from their day-to-day life. And this first fantasy world that we set in is more or less a Renaissance era Germany kind of story, or kind of fantasy world. And so we get to see a few different patrons. We get to see a trio or a few different guys that work in the town guard. They're kind of like soldiers. We get to see two of them that are friends, and then one of them that's their boss. And then we get to see this like kind of asshole banker guy who reminds me of the food critic from Ratatouille, and he even has like a similar kind of situation that happens to him. Like, he tastes something and then it like blows him back to his childhood and then changes his life forever, which I thought was pretty funny. It was like a kind of a cool reference there. Maybe it wasn't a reference, but it definitely felt like a reference to me. And then I think we see a young girl and her uncle, and this young girl is a kind of like an orphan, and she's taken in by her uncle, and she's kind of like a rich girl. She's kind of a noble lady, and she comes in and she asks for a bunch of specific things, and she assumes that no one's going to be able to bring her something to eat that's like that. And then, you know, the izakaya manages to provide, and she kind of has like a nice little like, oh my god, this is so amazing. And she smiles finally, and her uncle that takes care of her is quite happy to see her kind of acting her age, I guess. And I think we had one or two other stories, but in general, that's more or less what it is. And it's really, really good. I actually really enjoyed it. I definitely want to pick up more of it, but I was looking at it, and I think it cost $15 physically, and I don't think that it's worth $15 for me personally. Like, there's a lot of other foodie type manga that I would rather buy than this one physically. So I'm definitely going to buy this one, but I'm going to wait for digital sales and for, you know, just buying it digitally in general, because it's significantly cheaper, especially on Bookwalker, where you get like coin bags sometimes. So There you go. That's it for that. It's so great and very, very wholesome, and I actually really, really enjoyed it. It kind of reminds me of something along the lines of Beauty and the Feast or Sweetness and Lightning. It doesn't really necessarily focus on the food creation side of things, but rather it kind of just celebrates food and how it can change your experience, how it can change your day. If you had a shitty day, but then you go home and you eat a nice meal, it can change how you feel about that day. And I definitely agree with this. I think food is one of the most important things ever, right? It's like the thing around which our lives revolve around. Like, not necessarily, but generally, everyone has to eat. And because everyone has to eat, food becomes like a relatively important thing, right? Like everything you think about. If you're at home, sitting around the kitchen while your parents cook, while you're a kid, is pretty common. As you get older, sitting around the kitchen while you help cook is common. Every party that you go to has food. Every gathering that you go to has food, even if it's happy or sad. Everything has food. And food is a really important thing, and it can really affect your life. So I actually really think that that's a cool kind of message to have there. So that's it. That's all I have to say about this manga. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.